Hello and good morning, everyone. Only positivity here. I have my coffee with me, ready to kick off the 11th podcast on this series that I'm looking to launch called Elevated Thoughts. So, um, just level setting on what I'm doing here. As I pursue knowledge and life experience in this next phase of life through fitness, photography, traveling, one habit that I've really formed is reading. So, this podcast essentially goes through some of the books I've been reading as of late, taking those lessons learned and applying them to experiences in my life. So before diving in to the last part of The Alchemist, I guess it's just time to go through the story. So, as a young guy, I have a small group of guy friends, but we're all around that age where we're getting married, and our bachelor parties are coming up and whatnot. So we're very one thing we really look back on or we look forward to is the fact that we're all really lucky to be going to these places that we go to for our bachelor parties. We've gone to Mexico, I've been to California, Vegas, and a few other places. So, a few years ago, I had the opportunity to go on a bachelor party with one of my closest friends, and we actually went to a place called Macau. So, for those of you that don't know where Macau is, Macau is a Portuguese type colony that's a 45 to an hour boat ride away from Hong Kong, right? So we flew into Hong Kong and we took a boat from Hong Kong to Macau. And so what they call Macau is the Vegas of the East. And a quick background on Macau, it's decked out over there. I would say it's a million times better than America's Vegas. The hotels are cheaper and five-star quality. I'm not a big gambler, but the casinos, from what I saw, were extremely nice. And there's a little bit of everything there, right? So they have that casino nightlife. They have the nice restaurants, the rotating restaurants at the top of the towers and everything like that. And they also have a Chinese Macau, which is where there's a lot of history. There's a lot of churches that are very old. There's vendors in the street. You can get a lot of jerky and the food that's really native to that area. So it's a nice place. I'd recommend anyone going there. There's a little bit for everyone there. But anyway, so I went there with a group of guys, with a group of my closest friends, and it was one of our, if not the craziest trip I think we've all taken, especially that I've taken in my life. So essentially, amongst a host of ratchetness or mischief we got into over there, one funny thought comes to mind. So on one of our first nights there, we actually ended up going to a club. We were just having a few drinks, and I'm not gonna lie, I was buzzing a little bit. So we're just doing our thing, we're dancing, we're jumping around, we're wilding out a little bit. So throughout the night, I gotta use the restroom. I gotta go to the bathroom. So one of my buddies had to go with me. So we go to the bathroom, and you get in there, and it is suited to be like a multi-person bathroom, but it's super small, right? And that's the thing about that side of the world. Everything is just very compact. So, there's multiple stalls in there, but the room is the size of like a storage closet. It's really, really small. And so this bathroom is so I'm going to the bathroom, right? I'm in the urinal. I'm standing up at the urinal, and my buddy is washing his hands, and all that's between us is like a board, right? That's mounted on the wall, so he just can't see my business while I'm going. So we're talking, we're kind of reflecting on the trip so far. We're like, yeah, man, it's really fun. I'm having a blast out there. Like some weird shit's going on, but like we're having fun. We're having fun. I'm glad we came out here. I cannot believe we made this 15-hour flight and then a 2-hour boat ride to Macau. It's crazy that we all actually made it here, right? Because that's like an accomplishment in itself, us actually just reaching our destination. So we're going over that, right? And I'm midstream, he's washing his hands. And so I looked down, and this whole time I have been essentially pissing on the wall. I've been missing the urinal the entire time, because I've been looking at him washing his hands while I'm going. And then so I'm being bogus here, so I just kind of wash my hands and walk out of there and never talk about it again. So, yep, that's a little bit of an interesting story. Things can definitely get ratchet when me and the guys link up. But just some lighthearted humor for today, you know. So that being said, coming back into the story here, so we're talking about The Alchemist, by Paulo Coelho, and this will be the final part three, of diving into the book and some of the lessons learned there. So, we left off the podcast, by with Santiago, and the note was really squashing any fear of the unknown by believing in yourself, right? No matter what is thrown into your path, in the future, in the day to day, being resilient is just knowing that you can tackle that, as opposed to getting stressed out about it. So, we left off in the story where Santiago meets this Englishman, who's searching for an alchemist in the desert. So the alchemist turns metal into gold. So they both join this caravan, and they're heading into the desert. The Englishman is seeking out an alchemist, and Santiago is hoping to reach the pyramids. So um, they embark on this journey, right? And they're leaving. As they leave the city, they look back, and everything becomes more and more faint and distant on the horizon. And Santiago is just looking back, right? He's seeing the city that he came from just disappear in the distance. So this guide, who is kind of shepherding them through the desert, just looks at Santiago and says, "There's no turning back now. And when there's no turning back, you can only worry about the best way to move forward." So that's a really powerful statement, and we'll get into that, right? But this is also super bogus, because if some guy just looked at me and said that quote while I was turning around just looking backwards, I'd be like, okay, once again, Morpheus, like relax, that's a super hard flex. I totally get it though. Um, so, but this is another solid example, right? Why we shouldn't live in the past, right? So it's out of our control. Whatever occurred in the past is out of our control. And you know, one thing that so this is a long-winded story I'm about to go into, but one thing that's interesting is, I reflect back on my life and some of these lessons learned, right? So I am not afraid to admit that I was a big time liar, right? I think I bordered on the pathological, uh, horizon, or the pathological line. So, you know, I just didn't know how to say no to people, and so I'll just lie and think that would be the proper way to go about it, right? So, like, I'll use an example. Like, many times my friends, or even my family would have like a function or a gathering, like a week or two, ahead of me, and they would really want me there, so, and I could see that, and I just didn't want to disappoint them, so I would say, yeah, I'll be there, right? I'm coming. So um but as the date got closer, they would confirm with me, and I'd say, yeah, I'm coming. But then the day of, I'd make up some like elaborate excuse, like, oh, my car broke down, my house fell apart, my legs are broken, or something crazy, right? And everyone involved in that interaction, including myself, knew I was bullshitting big time. But somehow, right, my friends, my family, they still, find it in their hearts to have dealt with me during that time. But the point of this is, right? So I recognize now that what I did was wrong, right? And so over the past few years, I've had to course correct, and I've had to really push honesty on myself, even if it's tough sometimes. But I could live in the past, and I could say, "Hey, look, I'm just like that guy. My parents used to get down on me about lying, and rightfully so. And I could totally be like, I'm this terrible son, I'm this terrible guy, but I'm not, right? I've changed. I've become better. I've become more honest, and all I can do is look at my past in a positive way, but not stay there, right? Look back and be appreciative from where I was, where I am now, and then move forward. So anyway, back to the story. So Santiago's learning a whole bunch, in the desert. And what they do is they stop at an oasis, and he sees how beautiful this place is, right? There's palm trees, there's a well for water. He just sees like a lot of folks tidying up the place. They're really cognizant of how cleanly the place is, and they're taking care of it. And this is in the middle of the desert, right? So he starts to realize something, and this is really deep. He says, alchemy is something that can be learned in one's daily life, turning anything into gold, not just metal, turning anything into gold. So I'm going to take a second and talk about friendship, right? Or like relationship in general, but let's talk about friendship. So right now with the quarantine and but just in general, I want everyone to take a second and just think about the people who would truly be there for them if they were down and out or if they were experiencing difficulty. How many people could you really call upon? So the number is not important here, right? Just putting that out there. The number of people is not important. So I'll bring this back to my example. So when I left my parents' house, when I moved out of my parents' house, it was very abrupt, and I just kind of left. Um, but there were six people, right? My boys, my main guys, who took me in with. There was not. It was a seamless transition. They just took me in, and they took the time to check up on me, right? Because I was this guy who's like, I don't need nobody, right? Whatever. And they knew that about me, but they knew I needed them, so they were there for me, even when sometimes I didn't want them to be, or they didn't need to be. So my fiance is included in that as well, right? So I pretty much rotated crashing with all of the guys and my fiance during this time. But they all came together for me, right? To spend time with me as I went through a difficult time. But the moral of this story is that I stopped being unconscious about my friendships with them in that moment, right then. And I should have done it a long time ago. But I was going to turn those relationships into gold, right? I was going to be intentional with that friendship. I was going to tell my friends I love them. I'm going to hug my friends when I see them, right? Every time we see each other, we hug each other for a quick second, and we embrace each other. When we call each other before we hang up the phone, we say I love you to each other. When we see each other in person, we say I love you to each other. And I genuinely love these guys, genuinely love my fiance. There's no one else like them out there. But this is just a thought here, right? So I just want everyone to think about that. How many relationships do you have where you're intentional, right? And you want to be intentional, right? I want to elevate my friendship with my guys. I want to be closer to them. I want to have deeper conversations with them. I want to create a bond that is second to none. Um, and I do not have time for obligatory relationships in my life, right? I don't have time to just make my rounds with people. To me, that's not. There's no point in that. So I choose to just turn everything I can into gold in some manner, right? Friendship is an active commitment, and if it's true, right, we're going to go and use another quote from a book. It's only those who are persistent and willing to study things deeply who achieve their master work. That's applicable to friendships, right? That's applicable to relationships. The more persistent, diligence, sorry, conscious you are, the more benefits you will reap from that situation, and the more lighthearted you will feel, and the easier it is on your heart. But we can go forward. Let's talk about another example, right? Let's say meditation. So I'll tell you one thing. I've recently started quote unquote meditating because I don't think what I do is meditating. um, it sucks. Meditation sucks. So you think it's gonna be like this enlightening experience, and I'm gonna start, floating. I'm gonna be completely at peace, and I'm just gonna ooze tranquility. And that could be true at some point. Um, but let me tell you, this shit is not easy, my friends. So about 3 or 4 times a week, I try to close my eyes for 10 minutes and just, sit in that crisscross applesauce position, just on the floor and close my eyes for 10 minutes. So now I get through it because I'm like, I'm not going to open my eyes. But sometimes that 10 minutes feels like 2 hours, man. Um, I try to focus on like, breathing in through my nose and feeling that air come through my nose, and then feeling the air exhale throughout my mouth. But after about 2 minutes of that, like my mind starts to wander and I have to like snap it back into check. I go, okay, you're focus on your breathing again. So like I start thinking about what? Like everything. I started thinking about what I should eat, reflecting on the past, about the future, past relationships, my parents, issues, cute dogs sometimes. I just have to check myself. Like I'm supposed to be thinking about the color black and focusing on my breathing. That's what I've read to do, like as an introductory to meditating. It's not easy, right? So like as the weeks go on, I try to add on, okay, do it for 11 minutes or do it for 5 times a week. But it's not really as easy or as seamless as one might think it is. Okay, so the point of that is it's only those who are persistent and willing to study things deeply who achieve their masterwork. So time, right? Time and effort are going to be key for me here. And I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid that it's going to be painful at times. It's going to be kind of a challenge to get through all these things. So we take that challenge in stride. But let's come back to this story and go to the next point here. So we've stated now that the Englishman and Santiago are stuck in the desert, and the Englishman, right? They start getting into conversation. They're stuck there together. So he goes into the Englishman goes into how many years he's been pursuing alchemy. Okay, so um, Santiago starts observing the silence of the desert, and he just realizes that everyone has their own personal legend, and they're in search of that. And so no two people's personal legend are the same, but Santiago can respect someone who is in pursuit of their personal legend. And that relates, I think, directly to me and what I'm doing here. There's certainly room, right, in what I'm saying, what I'm doing, for someone to judge me, right? It could be about weed when I talk about weed. It could be about the pictures I take, the things I say in this podcast. But you know what? Like, all I'm doing here is I'm on a mission to find my personal legend, right? As Santiago might put it. And who is to say I'm wrong for what I'm doing, right? Who knows all the answers that the world to the world's questions? I don't think any one of us does. So why should I listen, right? Do you? I'm gonna say that. Do you? If you're doing good things and you know it in your heart, just go ahead and do it. Like if my personal legend isn't hurting people or spreading negativity, I'll just go ahead and keep at it. Unless and anyone else who's gonna be supportive, right on. And anyone else who's not, it's all good too, right? So I don't want to sound like I'm arguing with some fictional person who's standing in front of me, but just a little insight into like the reason I'm doing what I do. So I honestly support anyone who is curious about taking that next step, right? Whether it be like an Instagram page, fitness, cooking, picking up a new book, or just, embarking on a trip somewhere, right? I support that, right? A lot of my friends are getting into things now because we have a lot of time on our hands, right? Some people are getting into their soundboards, mixing music. I personally I'm coloring and things like that a lot more. I'm reading a lot more. I'm walking outside a little bit more. um, one thing to always do is, if you feel somewhat of a judgy thought coming along, right? If you feel like a negative kind of vibe towards something that someone's telling you that they're embarking on, just ask that question, right? Ask them what they're doing, ask them what they're all about before you judge and jump to a conclusion. So anyway, I feel like I'm soapboxing here, but just some thoughts I'm looking to share with you guys. So I'll bring it back to the book here. So Santiago is in this oasis within the desert now. Okay, so he hears that there's going to be a war between the tribes, and that really starts to worry him. Right, there's going to be like some desert war going on, um, and he sees this caravan member, right, who's a warrior in this tribe, and he's just sitting there, right, like the shit's kind of hit the fan, and he's just sitting there eating, and not faced by the idea of war. Okay, so Santiago goes up to the guy and he asks him, like, aren't you worried about like a potential war breaking out here? And the guy says essentially this. He goes, right now, the life is good. And all I have is this moment. So life's a party when you live in the moment. And life is this moment and nothing else. He says, like, when I'm marching, I'm focused on marching. If I'm fighting, I'm focused on that. And now is as good a day as any to die. Right? So this will lead me back. So what I think what I immediately thought of when I heard that quote was my favorite show, Peaky Blinders. So for those of you that don't know what Peaky Blinders is, it's a show that takes place in like 1919 through like 1930 right now. The early 1900s, like the industrial era, the manufacturing era, in Birmingham, England, right? So it takes place in like that London, Birmingham, England vibe. So. Um, the main character is Thomas Shelby, and he's like the anti-hero, the main character in the show. He leads the gang that is called the Peaky Blinders. So, um, so this takes me back to a scene that was in the first season. Okay, so he's at war with another mob boss who owns like these racetracks. His name is Billy Kimber, and so Thomas Shelby is supposed to have joined with another like gypsy family, and he's gonna go take over Billy Kimber's business. Okay, so Billy Kimber somehow intercepts that, and he comes straight to Thomas Shelby's neighborhood while the gypsies are at the racetrack. So he comes to this their neighborhood with a gang of like 20 men, and all Thomas Shelby has is six guys, six, seven guys. So they're outnumbered almost 3 to 1, right? So um, they so some of his scouts, Thomas Shelby's scouts, come to the garrison, the bar that they're at, and say, "Look, Billy Kimber's men are in the lane. They're going to be here any minute now, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever." So Thomas Shelby, right, he decides to have a drink and just wait it out. Um, and he's talking to the bartender, and amongst a lot of things, you can tell him he's starting to come to terms with the fact that he might die today. He's not sad, he's not happy, he's just kind of like no emotion. So he says, all we have is 1 minute, and he calls it the soldier's minute. Um, it's everything all at once for 1 minute, right? It's obviously not 60 seconds. It's just that when you go over the top in the war, you just it's all coming at you at once, right? Bullets fired, cannons sounding, things like that. It's just an onset of chaos in that minute. All of it, all at once, all the emotions. So he says, anything before is nothing, and anything after is nothing. So that's super dark and related to war, but it's all about being in the moment, right? The way to attain this hyper vigilance and this focus and remove worry is by being in the moment, right? Be so heavily engrossed in the now that you can't worry about anything. Just focus on acting. So that's a really good correlation for me of being focused on what is right now, right? Not clinging to any moments prior or future, but just being right there, right now. So that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys have been enjoying the series Elevated Thoughts as I've been putting out these podcasts. So feel free to leave me any comments. I'm happy to have a banter with you guys. But that'll be all for now. And remember, only positivity. Thanks, guys.